Anytime you hear that music, you know Don the Bar is right there. Don the Bar, how are you this morning? I just have to say you're in tune to rather station WBAI 99.5 FM, New York, WBAI.org. Don't forget 212-209-2950. That's 212-209-2950 is the number to keep this radio station going. Give 2 WBAI.org. Or better yet, you can send the moolah, the dunza, the NFT into 388 Atlantic Avenue on the 3rd floor. My floor, Don the Bar's floor, the floor with the ganja view. The ganja view with the view. Yeah, up in the cloud. Brooklyn, New York, 11217. That's Brooklyn, New York, 11217, por favor. Don, it's good to hear your voice. Good to hear your voice. So many things happening in the capitalist world. Hey.
Oh, yeah.
So many things happening in the capitalist world. I got a whole lot of things to throw at you. So you can duck, dive, catch them, throw them back at me. And by the way, Don, any day on the radio, you hear me say to you, how comes you haven't said anything about so-and-so? You got to correct me and say, no. Ask me why I haven't said anything about so-and-so, because I ain't got no memory, bro. So I ain't got no legitimacy asking you, how comes you have not, you know? So that's your job.
What?
You got to stay in my case. Anytime on the radio, I say to you, how comes you haven't said anything about so-and-so? You're supposed to hit me back and say, no. You got to ask me why I have not said anything about so-and-so, because I ain't got no memory. I can't remember whether you did or not. Got my drift? But I'm still mixing up my Jamaican breakfast with my Manhattan breakfast in the morning, right? All right, let's get into the scooper, the pooper scooper.
Yeah.
Imperialist USA is at it again, jacking up Germany to do something that the coalition government, which is very fragile, does not want to do. They don't want to send no tanks. But Imperialist USA, with their nuclear gun to the head of the Germans, it has proved that the war has raised the influence of the Central and Eastern European fanatics, warmongers, with their negative view of Russia, to demand that they diminish the power of France and Germany, who don't want to do this thing. They want to go back to the Minsk agreement that everybody signed off to. Am I making this stuff up?
No, man. There's a lot of scoop here, too. Okay, so they announced also they're going to release 31 of those Abrams tanks.
Whoa, I counted 40, but you say 31. That's okay.
Well, they're releasing 31 themselves, and then another 9 from the Allies.
All right, gotcha.
And that's enough for a tank battalion by itself. So, I was talking with Mark Sloboda the other day. He's an lecturer. He's American that lectures at on international relations at Moscow State University. And he was telling me that in different spots of the old Soviet Union there are these parks, like a park, memorials that consist basically of these sculptures that are nothing more than piles of destroyed German panzers from World War II, the tanks that they used to invade back then. They'd grab, here's 30 of them, dump them into a big heap, and this is the monument to the war at the park. So they're talking about they're going to be upgrading the displays at these parks, apparently, with the Abrams and those Leopard tanks that the Germans are planning to send again. The people, it's not lost on people in Russia that Germany is invading, with tanks again, like they did in 1941. Last time they did that, just to keep the memory fresh among Russians, for example, they killed 27 million people. they killed something like 6 times as many Soviet citizens as they did Jews. And the 6 million is a Holocaust, so I don't know what you call 27 million. But one thing you call it is memorable. Those people remember it. And when they see tanks rolling in from Germany again, whether they have American flags or Deutsche flags or Polish flags or rainbow flags or whatever, they're targets. And there's going to be an uptick in the level of violence and a westward tick in the location of it, because no sane person believes that the Russians are going to sit back and watch these tanks roll up to their border.
Yeah. This is really, really frustrating because, as I was saying at the top of the show, that at the end of the day, when all of this dust and bloodshed unnecessarily has settled, they'll all return to the Minsk agreement, right?
Well, the Minsk agreement obviously was in fact not an agreement. An agreement requires a number of things, including good faith. And we found out from the guarantors and the players all that there was no good faith, that the intent was to stall so that they could, in essence, move their invading force. The intent is to invade Russia. And so all of the other stuff is all bluster. What they were doing is putting the men and material in place to do that. Now, in 1941, the border was out, where the Soviet republics were. And so that's where the war started, when the Germans, started crossing that border. Before they got to Russia, they had to cross Belarus, they had to cross Ukraine, they had to cross the Baltics. That whole front was different. This time, they're already positioned in the Baltics and in Poland and in some of the other territories, including Ukraine, that border Russia directly. The Russian, what was then the Russian Soviet Federated Socialist Republic directly. So then they started about at the same spot, with the exception of Kazakhstan and Belarus, as to where Hitler finished. So, all of the fighting, the defensive fighting and the retreat and the scorched earth and all of that instead, this time they just drove up because they had friendly governments. They took them with color revolutions and the history of the Soviet occupation after World War II. There's something else that people should take note of when they're looking at Germany, for example, and France. Germany is under U.S. military occupation and has been since 1945.
That's true.
I don't know. People now, young people don't even know the history, I guess, because it hasn't been in the newspapers, and who knows what they're teaching them in school now. Mm-hmm. But Germany, after World War II, Russia suffered, like I said, somewhere between 25 and 30 million casualties because of the invasion by Germany of Russia, of the Soviet Union. I'm sorry, the Soviet Union suffered that many casualties. The Russians suffered the large majority of them because they're the largest republic. And so they fought back, and all the way to the Elbe River. The West, Britain, France, and the U.S., really the U.S. and some British troops, fought from the West in after watching Germany beat up on Russia for like 3 years. And anyway, they agreed in some grand gesture, hoping to make peace after the war was over. They met in Germany, and Germany was partitioned into 4 parts: an American zone, a British zone, a French zone, so the Americans could have somebody else at the table, because France had been occupied almost voluntarily by the Nazis, and a Soviet zone. The Soviet zone became East Germany when the other 3 zones, in violation of the post-war treaty, were consolidated into a country that became known as the Federal Republic of Germany. That part is still under military occupation. In 1989, the Soviet Union, who had been invaded, which Britain wasn't and the U.S. obviously weren't, and mostly destroyed by Germany, voluntarily left there and the buffer states that they had occupied between Germany and their borders as a defense. This is in 1989. rather than accommodating that move with a like move with the U.S. pulling its occupation forces out of Germany, Italy, France, and all over the place, they instead moved them further east so that they eventually ended up at Russia's border. That's the pre-war scenario here. And that is the condition where now you're talking about the Americans training tank crews in Germany and bringing in tanks manufactured by the United States and manufactured by Germany into a war against Russia at Russia's border. For the start.
I got you. But I was just referring to the framing of the Minsk agreement.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they claim that they're trying to get themselves into a better strategic position so that they can negotiate with Russia. This is why they are willing to do the killing, You
have to ask yourself, what are they negotiating for? What's their objective?
Good point.
The objective is the same objective that Hitler penned out in 1924 in his jail cell. At the time, he was looking at Germany after World War I being defeated. All the colonial powers, the Western colonial powers, France, Britain, and the United States in particular, were in a much stronger position after World War I as against Germany and its allies. And so he's trying to figure out how to bring Germany on par on the global stage, particularly with the U.S. and Britain with the Allied powers. That's how he was putting it. And he's looking around the globe for colonies because the reason they were powerful was that they were drawing the wealth, both human and, mineral wealth from around the world back to the homeland. You've been to London along the Thames. You see some of the booty that's gathered all along the Thames from around the world. It gives you like a hint of what we're talking about. So he's looking around the world. Where can Germany get its colonies from? And there was only one last place with massive mineral resources, oil, gas, gold, all these other things, and a labor force that he could enslave to carry it to the boat like the U.S. and Britain and everybody else did with their colonies. And that place was Russia. And so his plan was to conquer the Soviet Union so he could conquer Russia, own the oil, gas, and everything else that would be used to fuel German industry. They would have all of that land to expand the German population into because it would become German territory. And that would be their empire, and they would be able to, to be on par with everybody else if they were able to accomplish it. What the U.S. does, what it did in World War II when it won, wasn't to put to rest these kinds of imperial ambitions, like also the Japanese had in Asia, but rather to take them over, to succeed to the positions that these wannabe colonial powers had achieved, like Japan's conquest of half of Korea, etc., and to build upon that for what they wanted to become, and they did become for a while a global hegemon. That's the context for this whole war. The United States wants to take down the Russian government so that Russia can be opened up for looting, just like the colonies in the rest of the world. That's the plan. And so until they get there, they're going to keep doing this. They've spent more money on this project since 1917. Just you look at the U.S. quote-unquote defense budget, more money on this than any other project in the history of the human race. They're not going to walk away from it until it's done.
Sounds like suicide to me. Let's move on. The EU tightens stance on non-EU countries taking back citizens, and it goes like this. The European Union could use development aid, trade policy, and access to visas as, quote, leverage over non-EU countries that are deemed to be failing to take back their citizens, denied the rights to stay in Europe. Like this artist from Africa was going through, I think, one of those Dutch territories, and they shut her down. She was just going to England, passing through, and they treated her as if she wanted to stay in Europe, and she wasn't doing that. And they shut her down, and she almost couldn't make the show. Any of the EU's 27 nation leaders could endorse a plan at a summit in Brussels next month to use, quote, all relevant EU policies, instruments and tools, including development, trade and visas, as well as opportunities for legal immigration, end of quote, as leverage against this situation. The draft reflects growing momentum to get tougher with non-EU countries, and they're talking about your country down the bar.
Yeah.
Middle East, Africa, Asia, and the list goes on. You know, they kicked out in 2022 179,000 people were ordered to get the hell out of the EU, a byproduct of the Brexit breakdown situation. But 33,600 returned to their countries of origin. But the countries of origin saying, no, it doesn't go like that. You exploited us. You keep them. I mean, you're the colonialist, right?
Right.
Yeah. Seriously.
Okay.
And then, go ahead. Let me hear your feedback on that.
Go ahead. You finish it, because what I have is sort of contextual for the whole thing.
No. Go ahead. Hit me. I'm done.
Okay. So, we start out with, again, the same framework. You have colonial powers and then the colonies, basically. You have, a few very rich, powerful countries that have been sucking the blood of the rest of the world, and then you have the rest of the world. And so, for example, in the Western Hemisphere, because they don't like Mel Zelaya, president of Honduras, the U.S. sponsors a coup d'etat, and the government that they install, the fascists that they install, trained at WINSAC, or the School of the Americas, or the School of the Assassins, or some other Nazi camp, start killing off people who are trying to get some dignity for the people of Honduras. And so people flee to number one, their stuff is getting stolen. They're going back into the colonial mode where somebody comes to their house, points a gun, says, bring your stuff to our boat. You load the stuff onto the boat, it goes away. Now you have nothing. Well, the people then tend to leave the country because they have nothing and no prospects. Very often they follow their stuff back to the colonial power because that's the only place there's any food or jobs or housing, because it's all been carried off to there. And so there's no provision for this, of course, in the law. And so there's all kinds of, because there's this massive pressure for this to happen, there's all kinds of illegal activity that flourishes around it. In fact, it's encouraged around it. And now you have people that are flocking into, say, the United States or Europe, depending on which scenario you're looking at. And what happens is you have more workers than you have jobs. It depresses the labor market. The people that are coming in don't have a legal status very often, or a very tentative one. And so they're intimidated into silence when they're super exploited, and they're set against the other workers. And the workers here are told the problem is these people that just came in that want your job, not us that let them in and drove them out of their homes. And so you have the legal regime from place to place to place that's designed by the very same people who are the architects of this policy in the first place, use that so that all of the outcomes, all of the outputs of this process benefit them. Lower wages here, an intimidated population among the new arrivals, who are the people, now they're supplanting the existing workforce here. Before you had unions, now you have people that are afraid of immigration knocking on their door. You have also some leverage over some of the employers, too. And then you have, at home, in the other country, complete and total control of the fascist government. It's an imperialist dream come true. The same thing happens in Europe. That's the same thing that's happening with the status of people that are being driven out of places like Libya and Syria and all across Africa for.
And don't forget the activities of imperialist USA in South America, etc., Central America, Caribbean, etc.
Across South America since Monroe.
Yeah, let's go over to a place called Eswatini. I bet you don't know where Eswatini is. It's between.
In fact, I do. So South Africa. It's surrounded by.
Yeah,
South
between Mozambique and South Africa, right? But it used to be called Swaziland, right?
Yep.
Eswatini. Authorities in Eswatini have promised a full investigation of the murder of a leading pro-democracy activist, and this widespread fear that they're cracking down on such people as this chap who was murdered by the powers in charge, which is the king for life. It says Thaluni Maseko, chairperson of the Coalition of Pro-Democracy Group, was shot dead at his home in Layongo, about 445 kilometers from the capital of Mbabe on Saturday. This happened Sabado. The murder has prompted outrage at the United Nations, European Union, UK, and many human rights organizations, except Imperius USA is crying out murder in South Africa and condemn the murder of this sort of stuff, that it needs more than an investigation. Thulani Maseko was a stalwart of human rights who, at great risk of his life, spoke up for many who couldn't speak up for themselves under the dictatorship of this bloody king. His cold-blooded killing has deprived Eswatini, Southern Africa, and the world of a true champion and advocate for the rights of humans, democracy, and peace. The tiny state, which Don DeBar says, and correctly so, is located between South America and Mozambique, is the last absolute monarchy in Africa. This is disgraceful and has been hit by waves of unrest, rightly so, against this oppressor. Hours before Maseko was dead, King Msawati III told a parade at the Ngambezweni royal residence that activists, listen to this quotation, started the violence first, end of quote. And the quote goes on to say more trouble was coming for them. People should not shed a tear or complain about the mercenaries killing them. So this king, Msawati, has ruled Eswatini for a pretty long time. This used to be called the Switzerland of Africa in 1986, Swaziland, right? Don DeBar?
Yeah, this is a complicated story. What are you reading from? It's The Guardian or The Times?
No, I don't read from The Times. I'm taking this off The Guardian.
Guardian, yeah. This is one of the places that Lavrov visited this past week, where he was warmly received. Washington is very upset with the king, who was one of the traditional leaders as opposed to the colonial governments in Africa. And there has been some U.S. intelligence activity there in response, both to the basically the support expressed by the king for Russia over the last week, and also their engagement with China in terms of trade. The United States is in a battle for Africa in its mind. Africa is realizing that there are opportunities to trade with everyone in the world, and taking advantage of that fact is one of the pathways out of colonial dominance. And the United States is like a stuck pig at this point, wounded animal over the possibility, even though they had placed AFRICOM in control of most of the militaries on the continent during the Obama administration. The sheer power of free trade with partners that aren't dealing with you at gunpoint is very compelling, and the various places in Africa and in Latin America have been engaging China on that basis and refusing to side with the United States against Russia in the General Assembly and other places over the Ukraine situation. And so there's an awful lot of this kind of activity going on the ground in a number of these countries. As a matter of fact, this phenomenon, something I wanted to touch before we run out of time, is a statement that was issued at the CELAC conference, the South American organization that met in Buenos Aires this past week, with President Lula making his first, appearance on the stage under his new administration. And one of the first things he did was to condemn Russia as practicing and, as invading Ukraine and occupying its territory as an occupying power, putting it on par with the U.S. war that's been conducted against Venezuela. Now, I was kind of surprised watching what developed after the election in Brazil, because Bolsonaro was, on the one hand, obviously put in place by the United States. They drove Dilma Rousseff, who was the successor to Lula, out of office midway through her term, obviously directed from Langley in Washington, and then engineered the removal of Lula from the electoral campaigns by putting him in jail for a few years, playing lawfare. And then suddenly, Bolsonaro took an even-handed position with respect to Russia in the General Assembly, with respect to Ukraine. They sided with Lula. And at the election that was contested, they told Bolsonaro to stand down and to tell his people to stand down because they were protesting the outcome of the election. I was shocked by that and wondered what had happened behind the scenes. And suddenly we're seeing Lula turn, like we saw some of the members of the ruling party turn in Honduras after Xiomara Castro was elected. Members of her own party tried to pull a palace coup. These guys are slick. You got to keep your eye on both hands and your feet when they play. And I have some suspicions about what's going on in the country formerly known as Swaziland as well.
So let me ask you, when Bolsonaro was in power in Brazil, you took the same approach and posture to him as you do to Lula now. There's plenty of problems with Bolsonaro. He was a U.S. puppet up until this particular moment. See, there's some interesting things that go on. Still is. Because of this. In Brazil, the elite there, rather than seeing the U.S. as their only, basis of legitimacy and power, also see this BRICS thing that has China and India's economies as markets for their products as having value. And when the U.S. told Brazil and South Africa and everybody, okay, Russia invaded Ukraine, this is the line you're going to read, they said no. And Bolsonaro, forgetting his own character or lack of it, the actual elite, the ones that had backed fascists for generations on behalf of the United States, their own interest diverges from the United States, and so the policy reflects it. This thing happens everywhere now. There's a lot of stuff in play. So let's get back to Swati.
Yeah.
Are you defending his track record in?
No, I'm not. No, I'm pointing out the context.
I got you.
Yeah.
But you still have to comment on his track record, right? Since you're talking about context, right?
Okay, but let's start. We start with Argentina.
I mean, he has no regards. He has no regards for human rights. Come on, you know that, right?
I'm not talking. Look, to me, the principal contradiction in the world right now is U.S. imperialism.
I know that. I know that. That's the given to the conversation, and we know that U.S. imperialism have no regards for human rights. But here's this king who has no regards for human rights. That's the context, isn't it?
No, well, the context immediately was that this incident just happened right after Lavrov left. And this is about a month after the U.S. Secretary of State.
Since we're talking context, before Lavrov even came, that was going down, bro. That's what I'm trying to say to you.
And a month before Lavrov came, Anthony Blinken said that if people are going to play with Russia, it's going to get ugly.
And I'm saying before Blinken came, that was going down.
Yeah.
This is not just this guy. This happened to. Okay.
And before this king, a whole lot of stuff went down there also.
Yeah, but this king is propagating this foolishness. This don't make no sense to me. I mean, maybe it makes sense to you.
Yeah, it doesn't distinguish him from everyone else on the continent.
I am not saying that. I'm just trying to keep the context.
That's what we're talking about.
I'm just saying that this guy has, let me make it clear, this guy has no regards for no such thing as human rights. Come on.
Okay.
Straight up. And I'm not going to be an enabler and make any sort of excuse for him, because I think it's stupid for this country to still have a king. I mean, what kind of this monarchy mentality got to go down the bar? Come on, help me. You don't think so?
Well, I don't think it's my place to tell people what kind of government.
The world is the size, down the bar. Get with the program. The world is the size of a pinhead. That sort of thinking is in a museum. We got to think differently and approach it differently. You understand what I'm saying? There are no more borders. There's no more saying that. You understand what I'm saying? We're connected. We're in the middle of it. You follow what I'm saying? It's like me sitting in imperialist USA pretending that we're not on the verge of a nuclear war. You understand what I'm saying? The world, the size of a pinhead is the size of the world. So that sort of mentality is history. It's in a museum. You can't think like that anymore. You're not going to make it. You follow what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying.
So we gotta keep that context going. That's Lister's point. We're not going to make no excuse for none of these cats. Seriously.
So what do you got next?
All right. Coming up next, you're going to like this one. You ready for this one?
Right.
My man in India, Modi, is pissed off at the BBC because he says all that stuff is propaganda. The Indian government has invoked an emergency law to block the BBC documentary. And this is the time when Modi, what was he before he became head of the country? He was what? A labor leader coming up in the rank? Regional governor. Of Gujarat. And there was an uprising that went down, and they're blaming him that he has blood on his shoulders, his hands, and his lips, right? That's what the document. Have you seen the documentary?
I haven't seen it. I've seen about it. I don't pay much attention to BBC for the same reason that they're criticizing it.
The bias Broadcasting Corporation. You don't like the bias broadcasting?
British BS.
Oh, British BS.
BBS.
You sound like a cricketer from the Caribbean. Anyhow, more journalists have been killed in Latin America and the Caribbean than in the Ukraine in 2022. A total of over 67 deaths and counting. 50% of that has happened in the Caribbean and in Latin America. The journalists killed in Latin America and the Caribbean is more than the journalists killed in the war zone in the Ukraine. If you follow the newspapers in imperialist USA, they tell you the opposite. This report just came out recently, and it says that this guy Phillips was murdered. I guess he worked for the Guardian. Wow. He was murdered in the indigenous area of Brazil, in the Amazon, in the rainforest. You're familiar with that, right?
I didn't spend much time there, no, but yes,
yeah. It's sad.
Yeah, I mean, people are trying to rape and pillage the Amazon forest, and they're witnesses and journalists covering it, and there's a fight to try to preserve it, and there's a lot of people get murdered in the process because it's very valuable.
And in your favorite country, I love to go over to Canada. You ready for this one? Canada. Two brothers decided to rob a bank in Canada, and they had ideas of getting rid of the government. So the two brothers went over to this bank in Vancouver Island, and the British Columbia Bank. This happened on the it says on the 28th of June, and they I guess they didn't make it. They got shot up and killed.
What happened? They got shot up? Yeah.
Shot up and killed.
That's what happens.
I was listening to this account on the you remember the Waco massacre? You remember that stuff?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and how the FBI and those guys said this is going to be a cakewalk.
Yeah.
And they went down and got well served with a bunch of bullets coming from some religious fanatics, right?
Yeah, they didn't know what kind of cake it was going to be, a flaming rum cake or whatever.
Rum cake, right. Or a sizzler cake. And one third of them got wiped out. I mean,
Yeah, I know. I remember that, yeah.
They didn't even care about investigating where these people are coming from and how they're thinking and so forth. No, they said this is going to be a cakewalk, right? This is going to be a cakewalk. So when is Joe Biden going to release Leonard Peltier and Mumia Abu-Jamal? Get up off the ground. Get up off the ground. Stop laughing. Huh? Go ahead.
Joe Biden is trying to figure out if he's wearing pants. and every time he looks to see if he is, when he looks up to tell you,
Let me ask you a question. Why is it they don't let out Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, and Julian Assange? Why don't
they have secrets?
Why? But to hell with the secret stuff. I mean, their subordinates do exactly the same thing, and all of them, the whistleblowers, all of them go to jail. Mike Pence, Sleepy Joe Biden, El Trumpo, Bill Clinton. What's the other one? His Imperialist Majesty Barack the First. All of them, El Busho. All of them.
Secret written in crayon on his, yeah.
Yeah, but the point is this. With all of this coming to surface now, right? They have no credibility trying to hang high Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning, and it goes on and on.
Look at all the other people like Kiriakou and others that, ended up suffering in jail.
Exactly. I mean, this makes no sense. You think they'd press the automatic button and say, okay, let them all out, just like that?
It doesn't work like that. This thing eats people.
Don.
It's part of its diet.
Don, I need a laxative to get that out of my system. Yeah. This is sad.
Never mind. I'm not even gonna go there.
And one of my favorite singers passed away in a group. You remember the Birds?
Sure.
Yeah, Crosby, man. Crosby. I'm glad that he got to sell his entire catalog and publishing before he passed away. So,
what I want to know is, did he have to give the liver back?
That's a good one. Oh my God. So I'm going to dedicate one of my favorite tunes with Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young from an album that I enjoyed a lot. And it goes like this. Don DeBar, thanks very much for being here. We're going to do this next week, same place, same time. Is that right?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. And this tune, you got to remember, this tune is for you and your sister.
Almost
cut my hair.
I almost cut my hair, Don DeBar.
I know.
I see ya.
Happened just the other day.
Oh, you got me, baby. I love this song.
Getting kind of long.
Right on.
You might have said it was in my way.
Could have said it was in my way.
Damn right.
But I didn't, and I wonder why.
Take care, Don DeBar. I see ya.
I feel like letting my freak flag fly. Yes, I feel like I owe it. Because I had the flu for Christmas. increases my paranoia. Like looking at my mirror and seeing a police car. But I'm not giving in an inch to fear. 'Cause I promised myself this year I feel like I owe it someone. When I finally get myself together, I'm going to get down in that sunny southern weather.